What's interesting, though, is that I think with each indictment, there are fewer supporters turning out in protest. And so I think that's something to watch as we sort of see whether fundraising goes up or down after this indictment, which of course is in reference to Special Counsel Jack Smith's January 6th investigation, as well as efforts alleging that he tried to overturn the election.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Naomi Lim. Naomi, we have yet another indictment. Talk a little bit about how the Republican race for president is happening in the shadow of a lot of different legal cases.
A lot of different legal cases. I think what we're learning as these indictments continue to roll out, that it doesn't change the race in any way that detriments to the detriment of the former president, Donald Trump. I think we're seeing like solidification or solidifying of his numbers. What's interesting, though, is that I think with each indictment, there are fewer supporters turning out in protest. And so I think that's something to watch as we sort of see whether fundraising goes up or down after this indictment, which of course is in reference to Special Counsel Jack Smith's January 6th investigation, as well as efforts alleging that he tried to overturn the election.
And so, you know, this is obviously one of those cases that has the ability to really polarize people. But Trump has often used polarization to his benefit politically.
Exactly, and I think we're sort of seeing, and I think to his benefit, a lot of his rivals on the campaign trail are also using it to politicize the Justice Department and the FBI and things like that, as we're seeing sort of a split screen on Capitol Hill, where congressional Republicans are investigating Hunter Biden and other sort of business connections between the first son and the president, and I think that dynamic helps Trump. But although, to having said that, we're also seeing some candidates break with the president, most vocally former Vice President Mike Pence, who, I mean, he sort of used the same line during his announcement speech, but this whole idea that Trump asked him to choose him over the Constitution and Pence saying no. But we're sort of seeing him use words like crackpot lawyers and stuff like that, more colorful language that we haven't seen from a more buttoned up candidate in the past. And so I think that'll be interesting. And
a little fire.
A little fire,
for him,
a little spice.
For him, fire. For him, spice, yes.
Exactly. But then I guess on the other side of that, we're also seeing, well, Democrats and President Joe Biden and the White House they're politicizing it, but in a more maybe deft or subtle way. Whereas because when the president first came into office, the idea of democracy was so fundamental to his at least a midterm message and going in, as well as, you know, things like voting rights. And so they're trying to create this contrast with the former president, and these January 6 allegations, rather than making the next election a referendum on Biden himself.
While at the same time trying to avoid playing into Trump's argument that this is election interference, that he is being persecuted by Joe Biden's DOJ.
Exactly, and I think that worked much better for them when it came to the New York indictment and obviously as well the classified documents one. But this whole January 6th, I mean, even in Biden's announcement video, there were images from January 6th. So for them to criticize Trump over January 6th, but then not say that it's sort of political interference or it's a politicized case is a little bit more, it's like a tougher needle to thread.
So you mentioned the Hunter Biden inquiries that are going on, and so in addition to indictment, there's another I word that's been floating around Capitol Hill.
Yeah, the word impeachment, which we hear a lot of now in this past sort of like decade in American politics. It's funny the way that it's sort of developed. We sort of saw Speaker Kevin McCarthy embrace the word impeachment a little bit more warmly, particularly though sort of distinguishing between this idea of an impeachment inquiry and impeachment proceedings with articles and things like that. What we saw that was in response to is whistleblowers from the IRS sort of talk about how there was political interference or political considerations into Hunter Biden's investigation into his own tax affairs, and then obviously more recently testimony from Hunter Biden's former business partner Devon Archer. And I think it's interesting that we're sort of seeing the language on Capitol Hill change, Obviously, the candidates are weighing in on that, but they're a little bit more at liberty to talk about impeachment in a more sort of freewheeling way because they don't have a majority to protect in the House. I think McCarthy is very cognizant that there are some districts that are held by Republicans, but Biden won 2 years ago or 3 years ago now. And so I think he has to sort of weigh, or I should even, no, sorry, even last year on the midterms.
Right.
And so I think that he has to sort of balance that. I know that they're pushing back on this idea of an inquiry, but we'll see how that goes. And I guess the benefit for them with an inquiry is that kind of their argument is that the White House and the administration is stonewalling some of their investigations. And so it's a way, it's like another tool in their tool belt to sort of investigate the president and his family.
So we have impeachment, indictment, inquiry. There's another I word we can bring up is Iowa, and you've been out there recently.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything out there about the dynamic of the race that you don't really see here?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting. So I went to the Lincoln Dinner, which is a huge fundraiser for the Iowa Republican Party. I thought it was really interesting, one, to sort of watch these speeches in an audience that actually, I have to admit, was like quite a tough crowd. Like there wasn't a lot of cheering. I thought that there would be a little bit more incitement in the room. I mean, they did get very vocal when former Congressman Will Hurd sort of said that Trump was only running to stay out of prison.
Right.
I also heard one audible groan when former Vice President Mike Pence walked on stage, which I thought was interesting. But what happens is behind the scenes after the dinner, the candidates will invite their donors to come sort of shake hands, take photos, play some cornhole. But it's interesting to see just how much money these candidates spend on the different sort of after party, basically, because it's a way, like for example, former ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley had a very small space. It wasn't very crowded, and so that sort of shows you, maybe money is a concern.
Intimate is an I word we could use.
Oh, there's another one.
Intimate.
I'll add it to the list. But then also just watching these candidates interact with Iowans.
Sure.
Obviously, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has had a couple of negative headlines in terms of how he interacts with voters as well as children. And so it was interesting to watch those dynamics play out.
Did you teach the Iowans about fried Vegemite on a stick while you were out there?
Oh, I wouldn't impose that on them. That would be a horrible thing for diplomacy.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Good thinking. Thank you, Naomi. You can read Naomi and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.